Thanks for joining us during the very busy PCMA conference and taking time out of your day to join us. We're absolutely delighted to have Mr. Ray Bloom travel from his home in England to visit us this week and get together with some of our students and local members of the community and talk a little bit about his journey through the meetings and events profession. He practically invented it, at least some aspects of it. I just called Mr. Bloom old. Mr. Bloom is the chairman and founder of the IMEX group, which has a fantastic trade show in Germany, and recently launched the IMEX America show in Las Vegas, which was I think, undisputed overnight success in terms of the numbers and the metrics that this industry uses to measure success. And he's been an entrepreneur, I guess, for a very long time. His family was actually in the auto business, Volkswagen, and had very high marks in the service arena. He actually, many of you may be familiar with the EIBTM show, which he built up and then sold to Reed Travel some 15 years ago, and subsequently opened a show that's done equally, if not better, than that show. He is really considered a leader in this industry. He's been honored. I've got a long list of things that I could read here, but I'm not going to take time to do that. His views on the meetings industry and where it's going are sought after all over the world, so it's a real pleasure to welcome Mr. Ray Bloom. Come on up, sir.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much, Carl. I was wondering what you were going to start reading there, but I faced that situation earlier in the year with someone who has been inducted in the CIC Hall of Leaders, who had a list of all her accomplishments, and I was sitting next to her. I'll tell you who it was Faye Beauchene. I was sitting next to her, and I was about to go up and introduce her, and she's looking, what are you going to say? She says, we can take all that out. I was just about to go up and introduce her, so that's what happened. Good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with you in San Diego, amongst some very old friends and students and people I'm meeting for the first time. I'm here this week, of course, for PCMA, which is the most incredible success. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's not that far off 4,000. Those numbers are so high because of the quality of this organization, so it's really tremendous to see them succeed, and I'm sure that it will be very good for your city as well. There are so many decision makers here, decision makers both on the supplier side, but particularly on those who place business. So I hope it's a great benefit to you. I do want to mention one person who isn't here this morning because she was responsible for me being here in the first place, is Patty Roscoe. And I want to mention Patty because, first of all, she's a very dear friend and a very old friend of mine. Carl mentioned when I launched EIBTM, but it was in those days. You're talking about back in '88, when Patty was, of course, heavily involved in the industry for many, many years. But at that time, she was on the site board of directors, and we were very involved with the site, and I'll mention that a little bit more as I talk this morning. And I got to know Patty very well in those days. I've been to San Diego with my family. We've been out to dinner together. I'm sorry she's not here, but if you can pass on my very best wishes to her. What I thought this morning really was that we'd have a little bit of a short talk, and I was really talking to Carl about this, and I thought really I'd just really talk about the story of what's happened, a little bit about the Hosted Buyer program, but I'm not going to go into great detail about that, and then perhaps we'd have a little bit of questions and answers after that if you would like to ask any questions. I mean, the story really began back in the mid-'80s, and a partner of mine, who's a very dear friend, still is, had an incentive show in the UK. The incentive show was a premium show. It was called Incentive, and we held it in London, and it was successful. And one day we were talking about the fact, I was learning a little bit about incentive travel at the time. I thought, well, perhaps we could do something that was on incentive travel. And we looked at it and thought, it'd be nice to do something that was a bit broader than just the UK. Here came the link with Geneva. You'll find there's reasons for these links all the way through, and not too much was actually pre-planned. My wife and my in-laws came from Geneva, not originally, but they resided in Geneva. So I used to visit Geneva quite often. And one day a friend of my sister-in-law said, look, there's this beautiful, worked actually at Palexpo, beautiful new exhibition hall had been built only 2 years earlier. So he took me around, he showed me, and he said, it was absolutely beautiful and it was new. I thought, so it would be nice to do something here, I don't know what. So one day my partner and I came to Geneva to meet them, and on the way over we said, what are we going to talk about? And we said, well, this might be our opportunity to do our incentive show. This was actually in '85. So we took an option on the hall for 6 months while we were going to do some feasibility. That proved pretty much impossible to do any feasibility. I learned a little bit, but not anywhere near enough to make a decision. But anyway, we made a decision to go ahead anyway. And so we launched the show in July of '86. The lead time was just under 2 years, which is what I've generally done. And the first show was to take place in May of '88. So during that period of time, we did a lot of work, of course, to attract the industry worldwide, who, of course, I didn't know at the time. So everything was very new. And, of course, the key to everything that we do is to attract top buyers to come to the show. Whole reason for any trade show to exist and to be successful. And we did a lot of work. We bought a lot of data and so on. But about 6 or 7 months out, I got very concerned that we, in fact, weren't going to get these buyers to travel cross-border in Europe to come to the show. It proved to be right, I can tell you that. So I was in Montreux, which is another beautiful city, different to San Diego, but for those who have been to Montreux on Lake Geneva, it's very beautiful. Not that it matters that it was Montreux, but it happened that's where I was sitting one evening because they had their travel trade show there. And I was sitting there with the head of the PR company we work with, who was, again, a very dear friend, and we were talking about it. And we came up with the idea. And the idea was this, that to go to the trade publications in our sector in Europe, and it was based on readers' trips. I don't know how familiar they are here in the United States, but in the UK in particular, magazines and consumer publications sometimes have reader trips where they arrange a trip for all readers, and it's usually discounted prices and that sort of thing. So we based it on that, but we tweaked it, and we said what we would like to do is for you to invite your top readers to come, and we will pay for them. We will pay for their flights and their accommodation and any ground handling that there is. And so we went round to all the trade publications in Europe, and I think every single one of them said, yes, we'll do it. And that really was the origin of the hosted buyer program. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, and that's exactly what happened here. How were we going to get the buyers? The show itself, normally our shows are 3 days. We'd made it 1 day too long. It was 4 days. Bearing in mind, this was didn't know we were going to get any buyers at that. In the end, we couldn't reduce the number of days. So it was a 4-day show, and in that very first show, we brought in about 600 hosted buyers, and the show was a reasonable success. It wasn't the size that it is today, of course, as well, so it didn't have to be as many buyers as we get these days, but it was still only just enough. And the reason I say I knew we'd done the right thing is what I always say is we got every buyer in Switzerland to come to the show. They both turned up. So we knew that we'd done it right with the hosted buyer program. And regard the trade associations, which will say a little bit more about, but the one trade association that I've been associated with ever since then and started then was CITE, because of course CITE are the leading associations worldwide for motivational travel, is the term more used now, incentive travel. And we approached CITE, and it was tricky to work with them in the first year because something else we'd arranged, but CITE then endorsed the show, and CITE then recommended that the members came to the show. It was very much like that. They played a very important role because spreading the message in the very early years was not easy. So that was the origins of the hosted buyer program, and other ideas have flowed from that. Something that happened in the first year, which I'd like to mention to you, is how we started off with appointments. Not individual ones, which I will talk about, but the group appointments, where you get groups of buyers going from stand to stand on pre-arranged appointments. An area of our show was particularly quiet, and Paul Flackett, who's known to many people here, my friend and also the managing director of IMEX. By the way, he was the managing director of the IBTM in '88, so it just shows you how long we've been friends. Anyway, unknown to me, Paul left the halls and went across to the airport, and he met a group coming from someone else some people know, Martin Lewis, from Meetings and Incentive Travel magazine in the UK. So he said to Martin, I'll tell you what I want you to do. I want you to bring your group somewhere in the hall, and I'm going to get the exhibitors to come and meet them. I didn't know this was going on. So Paul said, look, we've just done so-and-so and so-and-so. I said, what a brilliant idea. I said, you know what you've just done, don't you? Well, here we are, and we're still doing the same thing all these years later, going into 2012, and we've been doing that since '88. So that was really the background to EIBTM. I will talk more about how we've refined it when I talk about what we're doing more recently. But in '97, I sold EIBTM to Reed. So that was and I had a non-compete agreement. I carried on managing it for 2 more years and came out in 99. During that period, my family and myself decided we'd do something else for a while. And so we launched some coffee shops. I don't know whether Carl's looking, he didn't know about this, but I thought I'd just mention, it's good you didn't have it on your agenda there, Carl. So we did, because that was just about the same time as Starbucks was starting in the UK. There were some other clones, but we did that. So we went into that and we opened about 12 stores and we had some more premises which we didn't open. But then my non-compete was coming to an end, so we decided to finish with that. We were fortunate enough to dispose of that. And in 2001, we launched IMEX. And if you look at the timings of the launch in Frankfurt, it was September the 25th, 2001. And that was the actual launch. And I came to the United States, it must have been 2-3 weeks later, to ITME. And we did a launch over here, a very depleted ITME, obviously, at that time. And so we launched it there. So that was the beginning of IMEX. And what's interesting as well is when you think on what's new, well, of course, the obvious one is technology. When you think that when we launched the IBTM, which wasn't that far behind, when we launched that, the fax was just coming out. We'd actually just moved off the telex. Yeah. So therefore, there was no internet whatsoever when we had EIBTM. Sold it, a couple of years non-compete, and the internet was there. And it changed a lot of things, and of course it's changed the world, but it changed a lot of things for us, not just the administration, which is obvious, but it gave us opportunities to make the show so much better. Because whilst we had our group appointments, we didn't have individual appointments. They were almost impossible. We attempted it manually. It was virtually an impossible thing to do. Managed a few. But here, of course, today, and what we started then was online diaries. And the online diaries from our hosted buyers is very successful because the buyers, each exhibitor in the show has a page in what we call our virtual exhibition. And they put a page up. It's all included in the rental of the space and all of that sort of thing. And on it, they have online diaries. And the buyers have to make so many appointments a day. To be a hosted buyer, you have to agree to do that. Shouldn't be a problem. We're only talking about 4 a day. That would be far less than most people want to see, so it's not as if they're under pressure. And some people go and make 20 and 30 a day, others we have to chase to make the first one, normal sort of thing. But the net result of that is that we're getting up to somewhere around about 50,000 online appointments are made between the buyers and the suppliers before they arrive at the show. Then we advise the exhibitors to confirm back so that the buyers know that they're expected. We advise them to go back to confirm, saying we're looking forward to meeting you, exchange some contact details and so on. So that actually happens. We've continued with the group appointments, which Paul started all those years ago, and we have about 1,000 of them. And what we do to make sure they're working, because of course there's imperfections with people having to arrive at situations on time in a busy trade show, but we have a team of our own staff who go around auditing it. So they go around to the stands a few hours afterwards or a couple of hours later, and they say, we just want to check that your group turned up and so on and so forth. We get the odd one that doesn't, and we manage to keep a few up our sleeve, and we ask them to let us know if they don't, and we send others around to replace them in virtually every case. So technology's helped us enormously there. We also send out, except for those that don't allow us, the names of all the hosted buyers a few weeks in advance. It's probably about half we're able to send out these days, which I'm pleased that we can send that many, because the result of that is it's to allow the exhibitors to do their pre-show marketing. But the point about it is, unfortunately, some people abuse it when they've got email addresses. It's a perennial issue, I should think, for most people. But in this particular case, it's important we do it so that exhibitors can do their pre-show marketing, and after the show, we send out the entire list, again, that we're allowed to send out to all the exhibitors to do their follow-ups through the year. So that's really how that works. I mentioned earlier on the involvement with the trade associations, and of course I'm here with PCMA, and we're an industry partner of PCMA, and we've worked with the trade associations from the very beginning. It started off with SIDE, it still is SIDE, but now it's really all of the trade associations. We work, of course, very closely with MPI, We work with PCMA, we work with DMAI, and we work with an organisation some of you might not be so familiar with, but it's a major organisation called ICA, the International Meetings Association, which is in fact really the most international of all of the associations in our sector, but it's largely a supplier organisation. It's got members, I think it's probably about 80 odd countries. There's only just over 1,000 members when you consider, compared to the big numbers of some of the other associations, but it's a very important association, the Association of International Palliative de Congrès, the convention centres, and one could go on and on. And this is very important for obviously the connection with the industry. The trade associations organise all of the educational programs, or virtually all, not all, but the vast majority of the educational programs at our shows, because that's their expertise, although we do some ourselves, but nevertheless they do most of that. And it's important in the, not only from the point of view of education, but from the point of view of what the shows represent, which is really a show representing not just the most important aspect of why people come, which is the buyer-seller experience and business opportunities, which is our reason to exist, but it's really to create the experience and also to make use of people's valuable time. So if you combine the visit to the trade show with the education and many other aspects of what I believe is creating the experience as well, because it's extremely important, not only is time used very well, but also the experience is enjoyable. And we have other issues that take place, other initiatives. We have, for example, around IMEX, a politicians forum, where we invite politicians so we can explain to them and the industry can explain to them the value of our sector. We have our environmental campaign, and we have the leading awards, I think, of any trade show organizer, at least worldwide, for the environment. We have our professional development innovation pavilion that takes place on the show floor, corporate social responsibility, and many other things, all taking place within the show. But apart from those that take place on the show floor, virtually nothing takes place to conflict with the show hours. So therefore, all of the educational programs, again, virtually all of it, takes place before the show opens in the morning or the day before, where an awful lot of it takes place. Just really to return to the hosted buyer program, the concept hasn't actually changed. The basic idea is to get buyers to the show and get them to meet the exhibitors on their booths. It's a very simple idea. It's not always so easy to do, but that's what the basic idea is. So what we were doing all those years ago, we're doing now. Of course, it's more sophisticated because it's more sophisticated for various reasons. Technology I've mentioned, but it's also more sophisticated because the expertise of the exhibitors is greatly improved over the years. I'm not going to tell you they're perfect because they're not, and not only are they not perfect, but of course, unfortunately, they change. So some people become perfect, aren't there anymore. So you get all of them. So unfortunately, we have to live with all of those issues. But nevertheless, they're far more sophisticated. We do a great deal we work very closely with them on the pre-show marketing. So then we came, and I'll mention just briefly, it's happened recently, of course, I'll mention IMEX America. 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago anyway, I knew nothing about IMEX America, but it came out of a discussion with MPI. And the feeling was that their expertise in these other areas, education and many other areas, but not so much in trade shows. And so they said, well, we discussed, why don't we get together and we'll run the trade show. So they dropped their trade show at their World Education Conference, and the decision was made that we'd launch IMEX America and that MPI would be our strategic partner and recommend the members and the exhibitors to come to the show, which